Hey everyone, Brian Cook here, and I just wanted to provide a deck list update after Star City Games Syracuse and MagicFest Atlanta. In front of you is the deck list that I played at Star City Games Syracuse. You'll notice that there's 3 Mox Opal, 2 Defense Grid, 2 Chain of Vapor, and 2 Crash. These are the main characteristics of this deck list. It's actually very close to version 7.5, which is on the homepage of the website. So the main deck is exactly the same. This is the list that I've had a lot of success with over the last few months, and every time I veered away from it, I didn't have great results. So I tried -1 Opal, -1 Grid, +2 Duress, and I tried that for a very long time with different sideboard configurations, and I didn't really have a whole lot of success there. I felt like losing the third Opal hurt too much, so I ultimately went back to this for Star City Games Syracuse. The difference from 7.5 is that instead of 4 copies of Echoing Truth, there's 2 Chain of Vapor and 2 Crash. You might be wondering why. Chain of Vapor doesn't answer Chalice of the Void, and, that's a pretty relevant card against us. So I feel like Legacy's become very fast recently, and the cards that beat you are cards that slow you down. So your opponent plays a Thalia, and then all of a sudden you have to take a turn off to bounce the Thalia, and then they play their second Hate Bear, which might be a Canonist or a Revoker, for example. And when this happens, it's a snowball effect, and before you know it, you're buried and you can't get out, and you end up losing the game. Very similar with prison decks. So Chalice the Void. You take 2 turns off to answer that, and before you know it, there's a Trinisphere or a Karn in play or something else. Like, the snowball effect is very real. So what you're seeing in front of you is a attempt at answering that. Chain of Vapor is very cheap, and Crash can destroy any Chalice. I mean, they're not going to Chalice on 3 versus us. By sacrificing one of your mountains. So 2 Badlands and a Volcanic Island. Crash has actually been very, very good for me. If you go to the Epics from Twitter, you can see a game where my opponent leads off on turn 1 Chalice of the Void. I Crash, and then deal them a lethal Tendrils and on turn 1. So Crash is certainly good. Chain of Vapor is also better against Sphere effects, while being worse against Chalice. So Crash is kind of our Chalice answer, and Chain of Vapor is our catch-all. So this is what I played at Star City Games Syracuse, as I said. This list is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I didn't do very well at Syracuse, but it had nothing to do with these 75 cards. So at Syracuse, I lost to Black Red Reanimator very early. Deck is very good against TES. It is what it is. And I also lost against Death Shadow, where I had opportunities to win, and I kind of just didn't go my way. I would consider them both to be not very favorable matchups. It is what it is. So Anthony Laverde, one of the EpicStorm.com writers, did very well at Star City Games Syracuse, and he was playing a list with no Defense Grids main and 2 Mox Opals. So these 3 slots right here, these are Duress for him. Otherwise, he played almost the same exact list. This Duress here was the 3rd Crash for him, but eventually he decided he wanted the Duress as well. So that's what he did well with. And in testing for MagicFest Atlanta this weekend, I decided I was going to play a hybrid list. But one of the things that I didn't mention about Anthony's list was that he's playing a basic island. So here you can see the basic island and a basic swamp. Notice that they're snow covered. The Star City Games Syracuse list also had a snow covered swamp. I was talked into it, so in between these events, there was the Legacy format playoff on Magic Online. I played my normal basics in there. I'm a superstitious person, and I feel like I never win when I have snow basics in my deck. I went through a very long stretch on Magic Online where I did very poorly while playing snow-covered basics, so I cut it for that event, and I did well. And then I got talked into playing the snow-covered lands again because it's free percentages you're giving up, and I'm the type of person that likes incremental advantages and that sort of thing. So I was talked back into playing the snow-covered lands. And here is the hybrid list that I mentioned before. So 2 Opal, 2 Duress, and a Grid. This is a compromise between Anthony's list and my list. It still gives you the Echo of Aeons plus Grid. So what you do is you Burning Wish for Echo of Aeons, and then Lion's Eye Diamond paired with Infernal Tutor, you get Defense Grid, and then you flash back Echo, and all of a sudden your opponent's 7 cards can't affect you. So at least play 1 Defense Grid, in my opinion. That line single-handedly makes it worth it. And the snow-covered island, or island in general, really impressed me in my testing leading up to Magic Fest Atlanta. It was very good. Um, the downside is in my list compared to Anthony's. Anthony's running 6 fetchable lands, and I'm only running 5. I think having the consistency with 8 fetch lands means a little bit more than the 6th real land. I've always ran 8 fetch lands. It's something I think it's a necessary thing if you want your pounders and brainstorms to be effective. So I've always ran 8 fetch lands and 5 real lands. He chose to run 7-6. There's no right or wrong answer. It's personal preference, but I think personally that 8 fetch lands is a little bit better for consistency. You can choose either or, it's completely fine. So I'm running 2 basics, 3 duels. And you might be wondering, like, well, what about Pulverize and Crash? The most popular Chalice of the Void deck at the moment is Mono Red Stompy or Dragon Stompy, whatever you prefer to call it. So they'll be giving you mountains. And the ones that don't, you can just sit on your 8 fetch lands until you need to cast Crash or you need to cast Pulverize. That's what I recommend. But the island and the swamp are really, really huge against Rug Delver. I found that when I started playing 2 basics, my win percentage against that deck just went up. So at this point through my testing, I was beating a lot of the fair decks and really only losing to other combo. So decks like Black Red Reanimator, for example, it's just not a good matchup. Unfortunately, Atlanta, my first round, Black Red Reanimator. Second round, Dredge. And before you know it, I have no losses to give. I win a very close match against Bug. I don't want to call it Bug Depths. It's more like Bug Control Depths. It's the Lincoln Baxter deck. And then round 4, I got paired against 4-color Control, and I took a line that ultimately ended up not winning. It was actually a crazy game, which I'll describe to you right now. So it's turn 2. I cast Duress, and my opponent responds with a Brainstorm. And then they reveal their hand. It's Force of Will, Force of Will, Force of Negation, Spell Snare, third land, Surgical. I decide to take Spell Snare. And then I pass the turn. My opponent draws, plays their third land, plays Plague Engineer off the top. So now I know that their hand is Surgical, Force of Will, Force of Will, Force of Negation. On my draw set, my opponent Surgical's Duress and pulls the other one out of the deck. Alright. And I had drawn Hope of Gearper. So I play Hope of Gearper, my opponent plays Force Pitching Force. And then I played the Thoughtseize that I held in my hand and get their last counter. So now they have an empty hand and a Plague Engineer with 1 known card on top. And now my turn, if I can draw any card that allows me to stay Hellbent, so a 0 mana cost artifact or a land, I can cast Ad Nauseam. Alright, so my opponent draws, they attack, they pass. I draw Empty the Warrens. Literal worst draw in my deck. So at this point, my hand is Chrome Mox, Rite of Flame, Burning Wish, Infernal Tutor empty. And I have 2 lands in play. And I decide that I'm going to cast Burning Wish because I think that my opponent might have hit a Snapcaster Mage. They played 3 Snapcasters in game 1. So I'm trying to bait out a possible Snare, and it resolves. So I decide that I'm going to get Grape Shot. My opponent attacks. They play a land, they cast Jace, they Brainstorm, and then they pass. I play Infernal Tutor, get a Rite of Flame, Grape Shot your team and your Jace, empty for exactly lethal. So they would have had to put exactly Plague Engineer on top, and they found their only other Plague Engineer in their deck off that Brainstorm. I asked my opponent Alan, and yeah, so that's my event ended right there. I decided to play another round, and I got paired against Black Red Reanimator again, Julian John, and I decided I had enough at that point. So that brings us to the next day. That night, I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to do. It was a very rough main event at MagicFest Atlanta. I felt like I didn't have a whole lot of urgency over my matches, and when I did, I chose the wrong path. And I'm pretty hard on myself. It's just who I am. I hold myself to a pretty high standard when I play. I'd like to play optimally at all times, not lose any incremental advantages, that sort of thing, as I mentioned. So I was dwelling a little bit on my matches, and I decided that I wanted to play Tormod Script, which brings me to the list I played in the PTQ. And here you can see it. I'm back to... Ooh, I forgot to remove a fetch land. My apologies. So here's the list I played in the PTQ. I'm back to my preferred basics. I'm a superstitious person, as I said. And having the snow basics just like never ever works out for me. I never do well with them in my deck. The PTQ on Friday that I played in, I ran the main event MagicFest Atlanta list. I went 4-2, but I lost middle of the event, so it wasn't anything special. So here, you'll notice that 8 fetch lands, but now it's 2 Mire, 2 Tarn. And my match against 4 color, I actually had I lost game 1 because I drew 3 Mires after I had been wastelanded twice. And I didn't have a last fetchable land in my deck. Kind of uncomfortable. My plan was to cast Echo, and my opponent didn't have a Force of Will, but I couldn't get to that 6th mana because I didn't have a fetchable land. So I was playing out the Mire just so that post-Echo I could fetch up a land that had been wastelanded, but I didn't get there. If I had been running a 2-2 split, I probably would have won that game. It is what it is, so I decided that for Sunday I was going to run a 2-2 split on Mire and Tarn. If you really want to run 3-1, I don't think it's terrible. You can do it. I just think that 2-2 is probably a little bit better. So 3 dual lands, 2 basics. This worked out amazing for me. I was super happy with this mana base, would highly recommend. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The island carries so much weight against Delver decks. So here once again, you'll notice that the rest of the package is the same. So I'm running the hybrid, 1 grid, 2 duress, 2 opal. So the main deck pretty much the same, other than we're losing the superstitious snowlands and then swapping a fetch land. Where the changes were in the sideboard. So we still have 2 Crash, we still have 2 Chain of Vapor, but we wanted to add in Tormod Script. So we added in 2 Crypt. We lost our Hope of Gyarados, and we lost our 4th copy of Empty the Warrens. So one thing that I had been talking with a couple of the Epic Storm team members with was casting and Empty the Warrens against these Rogue Delver decks and just dying before you can swing for lethal. It seems like these decks are very fast compared to previous Delver lists, and I just didn't want to go all in. I wanted to leave myself with a little bit more flexibility with Ad Nauseam. So against the Delver decks, the plan is to board in 1 more Empty and Defense Grid. And I faced Rug twice in the PTQ, and it was amazing having double grid plus duress. It was really nice having something to force through your grids and then have it stick, and then having all of their soft counters like Hydroblast and Flusterstorms just like kind of be awkward for them. Yeah, so the sideboard grid was amazing. I didn't really miss the 4th Empty. I faced Greg Delver twice. I also faced 4-color control where I boarded in the grid, and it was fine there. The 2 Tormod Scripts, I faced, once again, Black Red Reanimator round 1 of the PTQ. Tormod Script came up huge. And then I didn't face another Graveyard deck until the top 8, where I faced Cat Light on the new Hogak deck. And it's a blue-black zombie-based deck with Alter, and it looks to mill you out with Hedron Crabs and Stitcher Suppliers and blah, blah, blah. So Tormod Script single-handedly won me Game 2 and kept me alive long enough in Game 3 to the point where I had, in one turn, cast Echo Veons twice and 2 Ponders with tons of mana floating. And all I had to do at any point was find an Infernal Tutor or a Burning Wish. So I saw 14 cards off of 2 Echoes and then 8 cards off of 2 Ponders. Never hit a tutor, died with a ton of mana floating. It was a really disappointing way to end the event, but it was a crazy game. It was a pretty good run. And this is what I'm probably going to play for the next few weeks on Magic Online. I do think that the list will probably change a little bit with the next set. Due to that new creature rule of law. It costs 1 white, whatever it's called, Deafening Silence, I believe. I could be wrong. I don't know if I'm going to continue to play Crash. These might become Echoing Treats. I just want my answers to be a little bit more flexible, at least for the first few weeks. I really, really like Crash. But I just don't want to lose to White Enchantment. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. I might do 1 Crash, 1 Echoing Truth. I don't know. But yeah, I don't really have a deck number for this so far. I put it in my spreadsheet as 8.3, but I don't know if this is going to stick around long enough to keep that number. Um, yeah, so thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. And before I sign off, I would like to say thank you to everyone that donated for the domain and hosting. As I mentioned, all the extra proceeds past our cutoff point for paying for domain and host would go to the writers. What I am wearing is the main writers' gifts for the team this year. We had enough money to get pullovers for the entire team that are embroidered with the Knockout logo. So thank you to everyone who donated. The team greatly appreciates it. I've given these pullovers to a couple of the members already. The rest of them will be getting them when I see them or around the holidays. It means a lot to us. So once again, thank you, and thank you for watching. Take care.